And hello, everybody. You're live. It's Monday night, August 18th. If you have a question for the show, you can send it to SherryTalkRadio at yahoo.com. It's crunch time, folks. You know, the Lord has been showing me a huge open gateway this week that the Chinese are going to use to invade this country through, and they're going to come right through the southern borders of Arizona and New Mexico from Mexico. I've been hearing about it for the past several years, how the Chinese were amassing down there. But the reality of it doesn't hit you when the Lord hits you with it himself. I mean, he just really pounded that with me this weekend, even when it was a real eye-opener. He showed me they would come up through the southern borders of those two states and destroy and kill every person they see as they march through the countryside, desert, and cities on their way to America's heartland. You know, a couple years ago, I traveled across the northern border area of Arizona and parts of New Mexico. And from what I can see, the Chinese, when they reach these Oregon borders that I was able to get a couple years ago, at that point they'll start to get sick. By the time they reach the heartland states of America, they will be decimated. But the problem is, by the time they are decimated, they would have destroyed the infrastructure and millions of lives in Arizona and New Mexico. So we need to get busy. We need to Oregon, the southern bordering areas of those two states, so that by the time they even cross Mexico, they will start to get sick and decimated and too weak to carry out their planned march of destruction. Someone or even pairs of groups of people need to drive from east to west all the way across each state and through an Oregon puck every 2 miles. This will create an Oregon border across each state to the southernmost areas as possible by the Mexican borders of those states. Now, I'm not talking about going down and getting in the sand and getting right on the borders. If there is a roadway, public highway to the southernmost part of each state, that's what needs to be focused on. Just take those roadways clear across the states from east to west. When the Chinese leave Mexico to advance in the United States, they will hit this Oregon and get sick. Like I've been talking about on the last couple weeks of this show, Oregon is causing them to get alien flu, which they've termed as avian flu. And it is basically just an alien flu, and it's going to plague aliens and hybrids. And the Chinese folks are a serpent hybrid race of Satan's. And they are his armies, a part of his armed forces in taking over the world for the Antichrist. I don't think people are taking seriously. I know, I had it as a thought, well, when we go into martial law, that the Chinese will be used to herd people into the camps and the trains and all that. And yeah, that will happen. That's down the road. But what we need to focus on is that they're there, they're ready to come up, and they're not here to herd us in the camps. They're here to conquer and destroy America for Satan. And so we have work to do, folks. Millions of lives in New Mexico and Arizona depend on it. You know, a couple years ago, the Lord showed me there was a group of men He had blessed with an abundance of finances to use in these last days for this ministry. These men assumed I was not of the Most High, and they didn't think He would stand up a woman in these last days to lead His people against our enemies. What they assumed was wrong, and they never went to Him about it. Instead, they gave much of the financing to someone else's ministry, someone the Lord had not stood up, but had taken it on Himself to declare that the Lord had. Meanwhile, this international ministry of mine, the Oregon Warriors, and myself have suffered greatly because of their arrogance and errors. The Lord showed me that one of them actually knows they made a mistake and was cowardly not approaching the others out of fear of what they would say and think. Well, folks, this is their last chance to do the right thing and support this ministry. If they don't, the Most High has told me the blood of millions of people will be on their hands. I know they will listen to this show. I know the Most High will lead them to this. This is your last warning from Him to do the right thing. And to all those who love the Lord, who asked Him about me, and He said, yes, she's mine, and led you to financially support this ministry, and you haven't, you have a very short time to do the right thing. When the Most High anointed Esther as Queen of Israel, the nation was unarmed and about to be at war and destroyed by the coming invading armies. She armed the people and led them to victory against their enemies. Is it so far-fetched, folks, that He would once again stand up a woman to lead Israel, His people, to victory against the coming invading armies? Of course not. You know, He stood me up years ago, and we've accomplished much, but there's still much to do in the short time that's left, and I mean very short time that's left. We could be looking at a matter of 2 to 3 weeks here, folks. This ministry, what has become Yahuwah's Last Days Warriors ministry, needs financing to finish what we need to do. Money to buy supplies and pay for expenses incurred to take the road trips necessary to finish protecting this country with Oregon. More work needs done in our southern border areas, Arizona and New Mexico, and if it doesn't get done, those states are going to be destroyed. And millions of lives lost. And we need financial help to make it possible to get these areas and other areas protected. It takes thousands of dollars just for supplies for the Oregon. And we need a new vehicle to even make it possible to take another road trip. My 1994 vehicle just won't make it on another trip. I was lucky just to get across Pennsylvania a couple months ago and just get all the way back. So Yad's Bride can either stand up and do something to protect this country and get Oregon out in key areas and support my ministry, or it's not going to get done, folks. If you're waiting and hoping others will stand up, well, guess what? Only 2% of the Oregon warriors themselves will leave their areas to go on road trips to do others. I get emails all the time. Is anybody down here in North Carolina, South Carolina, Montana doing Oregon? I get emails all the time. I'm like, why don't you stand up and get it? Everyone wants somebody else to do the work. Most of the warriors who have covered their own areas, and that's it. But you know what? That still says so much more than the tens of thousands of those who claim they're believers of the Lord who haven't done one thing. While they sing about He will protect us from the coming storm, they seem to ignore that He has given us the weapons to protect ourselves with already. And if they are caught in the storm, it's no one's fault but their own, because He's already done what He's going to do. The rest is up to His followers to do what He has told them to do. I started this ministry 8 years ago. People used to laugh about aliens and UFOs. Most were in total unbelief that aliens and UFOs even existed. Until now, you can practically see the UFOs nightly for yourselves. You can go outside, look up in the skies. You can see their star-like motherships. You can see UFOs through the night. Most people around the world can see the effects of Oregon in the last days. You can see it knocking UFOs out of the skies as flashes of light. I've been talking about for the past month or so how when the UFOs are hitting these Oregon areas, they're being destroyed. They're being decimated with alien flu that they wrongly have called avian flu. I always kept seeing in the codes how this Oregon would destroy and cause a huge plague among the Antichrist forces. And I didn't realize until recently that this avian flu is the alien flu, that this was the exact same plague that I've been seeing in the codes. I've warned about the coming UFO and alien invasion for years, and China's forces are part of the armies of the Antichrist. They're a serpent seed race that will do the bidding for the Antichrist in the last days. Conquering America and Christians in this nation is the first plan of their agenda, folks, and they're building up and getting ready to implement it now, and they're already getting ready. I've talked about on this show how a gentleman who worked on the northern border of Canada and Michigan just walked up to my husband and said, for no reason, I don't know why I should tell you this, but I want to tell you something. He goes, they're bringing in by the truckloads Chinese equipment, and they're taking it down to Kentucky. And so why would he feel led, other than the Most High Himself leading him to do so, to tell my husband that? I've also got people down in Kentucky that have been talking about the military buildup down there. 150 Katrina-type trailers now sitting at bases around Lexington, Kentucky. They're getting ready for some kind of a disaster down there. You know what? And people say, well, our Congress is going to protect us. Our president's going to protect us. And you know what, folks? The secret societies that our members of Congress and President are involved in are all working together to bring the world and this country under dominion and conquerorship of the Antichrist and the destruction of the United States through all their contrived and planned terror attacks, wars, economy crash, and martial law is all just going on for them. They're planning this. They're the ones behind it. They're not going to protect us. They're going to take off running in underground bases to get away from the Oregon air and have all this destruction planned on the surface for the normal people. We're looking at a war between the wheat and the tares, folks, because Oregon doesn't bother people. It doesn't bother the wheat, but it will destroy the tares. And so that's why you're going to see the tares take off hiding in underground bases and dropping over dead. We're going to see a lot of races, a lot of these hybrid races affected by this avian flu because it's an alien flu. And it's going to be a plague that the Lord puts on them Himself. And He's going to do it through the Oregon that we've had put out over the world over the last 4 or 5 years. The Lord's blessed many people with finances to be used in these last days to be supporters and backers of this ministry, and they just haven't done it. The problem is they're supporting wolves instead of the sheep. They're supporting pastors and ministers the Lord Himself has not stood up, and ignoring those the Lord has. Maitreya, the Iran Mahdi, will attempt to conquer the world for Islam, I've talked about him for years. He's the first beast of Revelation 13. He could arrive this September, folks.